set up the agency that we run on a political basis. Primarily, we recognize that majority world countries, poor countries like Bangladesh, are known only for negative things, and poor people are generally seen as icons of poverty. That is how they're represented by the West, by international media, by developing agencies. And of course, there is a certain agenda that they have, which this type of representation caters to. So it was important for us to create a platform where local photographers and writers could articulate their own viewpoint and could challenge the stereotype that was being set up. But there was a problem in the process of doing so because, of course, an organization like that needs to survive. And in a country like mine, most of the organizations of this type are dependent on donor money. They get funding, and the funding is what keeps them going. We were very conscious from the beginning to avoid that trap, because the minute you fall into that mechanism, you give up a lot of your freedom. And certainly you give up any political flexibility you might have. So our model was different. The idea was to set up a professional organization that would provide professional services for a fee, but we would keep social responsibility at the foremost of our mandate.
What kind of social responsibilities?
Several things, addressing social inequality, the fact that it happens between nations and also within nations. I mean, in terms of the trade imbalance, in terms of very distinct inequities between the North and the South, that was something we wanted to challenge. But of course, in our own country, there are these wide differences and there is exploitation. So we wanted very clearly to address those issues. At the same time, we needed to be a professional organization that would make a living, that would provide resources and facilities for media practitioners. So we had to build it on a very different model to the ones that are usually done. We set up as an agency, but if we had merely stayed as an agency, I don't think we could have survived. Not only that, I don't think we could have then achieved what we wanted to achieve. So right from the beginning, we were very diversified. On the one hand, we had the photo agency, but we also set up studios and darkrooms with the idea of providing the back-end facilities that the agency itself needed, but also as a means of gaining revenue. But as we went along, the fact that our work was distinctly political meant that the spaces where we could show work was rapidly shrinking. So at some stage, we tried several things. First, we built a gallery where we could show independent work without it being censored. And in fact, we're now building our second gallery, which will open on the 22nd of September. I have to get back for that. But what we also did was we began to question our own position as media practitioners, in the sense that I am a middle-class male photographer in a relatively poor country. So obviously, I'm in a hugely privileged position in my own media environment. But that is true of the media in general. The media, at least in my country, and probably in most countries, are run by middle-class, upper-middle-class people. So there's very little working-class representation. It's also very misogynic. It's mostly men. So we started doing two different projects. One was to train women photographers, which we started in '92. And then in '94, we started a very interesting project, which was to teach working class children photography. And in fact, that perhaps has been the most successful exercise we've ever entered. The children were 10 to 12 years old at that time, so they're 20, 22 now. And
Kind of, how can I say, it's a kind of formation. It's like in the school.
not really, in the sense that it started not with a very ambitious plan. The idea initially was that we would work for 6 weeks with a group of 10 children, giving them enough skills so that they could document their own lives. But in the process of doing so, we got adopted by the children, effectively. And it was going to be a 6-week project. It is now 11 years, and they're still with us. In fact, most of them work in our agency now. A couple of them are working overseas for our agency. One of them has just won an Emmy Award. And they are doing extremely well. But more importantly, they're asking very tough questions, not only of mainstream, but also of ourselves. They are very critical of our own agency, because they say, you have these grand ideals and objectives, but do you actually adhere to them within your own organization? So we have had to deal with their critical appraisal of ourselves. And that's been very useful, because it's meant that we've had to do a reality check on ourselves. But also, it's meant that we have had to question ourselves in terms of our motives, in terms of our directions, because we've been constantly confronted by these pair of eyes who have, while they've been friendly, have been looking at us from a very, in some ways, a distant point of view, because they come from a very, very different background to us. So all of that combined has created a very interesting organization. I mean, we have been involved in publishing right from the beginning. So we do print publishing, we do electronic publishing, we produce video, we operate as an internet service provider, we have these galleries, and of course we provide photographic services. But in '98, we felt that one of the ways in which we could continue the work that we're doing would be through building the educational capacity that was missing in Bangladesh. So we set up a school of photography, which now offers a BA in photography. And interestingly enough, we now have students coming from Europe to study in our school, which is a very interesting way to turn this thing around. The other things that we do as media professionals is, of course, look at the social issues which are of importance to us. But whereas documentary photographers, by and large, have photographed the exotic and generally the marginalized in terms of resources. You know, you photograph the drug addicts, the sex workers, and the poor and the down and outs. You forget that there is another part of the story that needs to be told. And what we have done is photograph the wealthy in countries like mine and look to put them under the microscope and look to see what their lives involve and what keeps their economic position in place. The other thing which we've started doing is something for me very challenging, but also very interesting. I'm now photographing the upper class in Britain. For many years, people from the West, the colonizers, have come to our countries. They've photographed us, catalogued us, measured our skulls, measured our penis, put us into boxes. I think it's about time we turn the thing around. So I'm now working in Britain, photographing the wealthy and upper class in Britain.
But how can I say how your center can be
Sustain itself. Yeah. Well, I think the way we began was part of it, because we started with the decision that we would be an independent organization, not depend upon funding. Therefore, we developed a different work ethics. Everyone who works at the agency knows that if we don't earn enough during the month, there's no salaries at the end of the month. So there is a certain accountability for each individual within the organization. The other thing we recognized was that if that is what we had to do, then we had to provide quality of a certain level so that we could compete in the market. So right from the beginning, we provided very high quality professional services which can compete within our own market, but also in the international market. So the combination of those have been a factor, but also we've had to be very innovative. We've had to be very resourceful. We've had to plan well in advance to try and make every dollar stretch.
Yeah, but now it's totally independent.
It has always
It's
been
worth
totally
like-
independent.
Yeah.
It has always been totally
Yeah.
independent. And that is also why we can continue to be political.
Yeah.
Because we have had a lot of situations where there have been conflict of interest. For instance, during the invasion of Iraq, we were very critical of the British government's position. And the British Council at that time wanted us, were warning us that, they would not want to partner with us on certain projects if we maintained this position. The United States government has in the past given us veiled threats saying that they will not partner with us on projects because we were very critical of Clinton's visit to Bangladesh. But we've been able to ride it because we don't depend upon their partnerships. Sure, they're a client like everyone else, but we have a viable client base. We survive without them. And while there may well be certain customers which we might lose because of certain positions, by and large, the work we get is because of the quality of the work and our professionalism.
Keep going. Oh, very good. No, this is a pretty word, because for me it's quite difficult to imagine how a thing can work, but in the beginning,
It
because
has-
it's something for me it looks like a topic in
Yeah.
a very good
Yeah.
sense of this.
No, I know what you mean. Well, everyone told us we were being crazy. It would never work. But, we started in 1989. We're still in business 16 years later. So our birthday was on the 4th of September. So that must say something. If you're in business for 16 years, I think you're a solid organization.
No, amazing, amazing.
Thank you.